So why don't I start with just having you guys introduce yourself. And Krista's going to ask you some questions. Don't worry, she's not going to get too deep with you guys, but she might ask you a few questions too as we go. So maybe we'll just start with telling us about your name, class year, what sport you play, and where you are right now during this pandemic. So I'm going to start with Alex.
Hey, what's up, everybody? My name is Alex Charles. I'm a junior, class 22 on the soccer team. I'm currently living in Princeton, New Jersey, actually in a house off campus. I'm in the School of Public and International Affairs. Awesome. Is that everything?
That's good. Yeah, we got lots of questions for you, Alex, so we'll come back to you.
All right, sounds good.
Let's go with Mackenzie.
Hi, my name is Mackenzie. I'm a senior on the women's softball team, and I'm currently in the politics department and also pursuing certificates in European cultural studies and the history and practice of diplomacy. And I'm currently in South Carolina.
Awesome. All right, Max Johns.
Hey, I'm Max. I'm a member of the men's basketball team. I'm a junior. I'm studying neuroscience, and I'm currently at home in High Point, North Carolina.
All right, a lot of Carolinas going here. So I'm going to start with you, Alex. We have a lot of our most dedicated alums, volunteers on the call with us today. What does their investment in you and the support of Princeton Athletics sort of mean, and how has it impacted you over your time?
I think it means everything to me personally, and also to the students that I work with. I mean, I think, especially just when it comes to kind of the Black Student Athlete Committee, I think we put in so much hard work over the summer, just trying to contemplate our experience as Black student athletes and just as student athletes. And so to kind of be able to bring our work to you specifically, but also to the athletic department, and to get all this feedback from you and the coaches, and just people who are just passionate about seeing our vision implemented. I mean, I think it means a lot because, you know, we feel like as student athletes, we're trying to, you know, we represent Princeton in everything we do. In our sport, you know, we constantly compete, you know, for Princeton with the P on our chest. And I think that's a point of pride for us. And I think it's boosted a lot. I feel even more proud when I know that, you know, my community is behind me, not just on the field, but off the field. And I know that everybody that I work with kind of feels the same way. So yeah, it means a lot.
And you had an opportunity. I mean, I know I was on a call with you with the soccer board and some alums, and you really talked about some of the work your team's been doing. You, as you mentioned, are a founding member of the Black Student Athlete Council. You've been working like crazy over the summer with us and with your fellow students, but you had the opportunity to kind of share with your alumni friends group. And, you know, what'd you feel about that, and how important was that to you?
Yeah, I mean, I think it was scary at first. You know, you never. I hadn't met a lot of those people before, and, you know, I was kind of putting myself out there and just kind of explaining what we had been working on. And you kind of never know the reception that you're going to get, but it was fantastic. And I think it was exciting for me because I think it was kind of the first time I was able to speak about something that I'm just super passionate about to a group of people. And so I felt like I was doing important work, and I felt like I was speaking to a group of people who were ready to listen, who were ready to hear what I had to say. And I got a lot of great responses from it. A lot of our alumni were interested in helping us out. So yeah, it was a really cool moment.
Krista, is that the sandwich right there? That sounded like the sandwich.
Yeah.
That's awesome, the bravery. Okay, I'm gonna go to Mackenzie. You know, as a sort of leader on your team, how have you worked to sort of maintain connection and community with your teammates during this pandemic?
Yeah, so kind of the biggest challenge for us has been everything's through Zoom, everything's through text. And so it's trying to find a way where it's not an overload of virtual communication and making sure that everybody's engaged with one another, even though we have people in California to New York. And so kind of the biggest thing that we're trying to do right now is invest in each other outside of the softball field, you know, trusting that we're going to put in the athletic work on our own and report back to the group, but more so making sure that everyone's mentally okay, sending texts, phone calls, having study breaks each week. We play, you know, games on team calls. We've had a couple of visits back and forth, just really making sure that everybody still feels connected on a personal level before the athletics, because as long as they're connected on that personal level, the athletics will follow.
Wow, Krista, they're hitting it here. They're nailing it right there. The community right there. So Max, You're an amazing leader, both on your team and within our department. You're a member of VSAC, which is the Varsity Student Athlete Committee, Advisory Committee. What does kind of leadership mean to you? How has your leadership grown over your time at Princeton? And particularly, how has your leadership grown during this pandemic?
Yeah, I think leadership just broadly sort of means like serving the people in your community and serving the people that are around you. It's really not about you in any way. And I think just like during the pandemic, it's been difficult to like really connect with like see each other eye to eye. So I think leadership for me in the pandemic is more just like being able to share my experience, sort of like for the freshmen navigating Princeton online, like what really works for me, what you should really center yourself on, sort of like how you can listen to yourself each day. So I guess it's difficult because like naturally I'm a quiet person and I don't really talk a lot. So I guess I've been forced to really volunteer my ideas and like volunteer my experience. And that's, I think it's been helpful for people, at least I hope.
Well, I bet with the first year students, I mean, talk about having to be brave, to take on Princeton without the role models in the locker room and at practice every day. I know for me as a student, I just was watching in the soccer locker room, in the hockey locker room, how are these upperclassmen handling this crazy place called Princeton, right? And now not having that sort of experience and not being able to watch, I'm sure your leadership for those students has been really, really important. Are there any specific things you and your upper class teammates have been doing, or?
I mean, there was one, we went in New Jersey, one of our teammates has a house in Stone Harbor, and we all, probably 9 of us, we all came together and hung out for 2 weeks. And there was a couple underclassmen there. And you sort of like show them the ropes, I guess, in like the ways that you can. And you sort of like, we play a couple games of pickup basketball, like, and you sort of show them by example, I guess, like, this is how you play hard. This is how you sort of, like, this is how you carry yourself. And I guess it's not at Princeton, which is different, but like, I don't know, I'm not really sure how to,
yeah, no, that makes sense. I mean,
crazy,
you're a tremendous role model, and seeing how you operate, I think that's a big part of Princeton. We all grow through the people that we're around. I know I do every day through the coaches and through administration, through you guys as student athletes. And so thanks for doing that. I think it's pretty awesome. Krista, I know you want in, right? You got some questions for these guys, so I'm gonna let you ask them a question here. You're muted.
Max, I'd love to ask you first, this question of like, what advantage you think sports have given you throughout playing them, but emotionally? What emotional advantage did you have from playing and competing at a high level?
Well, I think first, from just like a physiological perspective, sports gives me balance. It gives me like a release from class that I kind of need. Because like my studies are pretty difficult, and I think I'd go crazy if I didn't have a way to just sort of exhaust myself. But emotionally too, I think I get a lot of reward from like competing with people, but in a way that's sort of like is not destructive. Like it's friendly. Like you can compete with your teammates, but then afterwards you sort of go to the locker room and you talk about, anything that's unrelated to basketball. And those things are really like, those sort of social relationships are really powerful for me. And I get a lot of reward from that.
Awesome. Yeah, great. All right, Krista, ask one of the other guys something.
Yeah. Okay, so Mackenzie, what scares you and what thrills you most about this moment in time?
I guess what scares me the most is a lack of information and the inability to prepare and to know what's going to happen. I'm a big planner, writing everything down, making sure I know what's going on, because I'm a firm believer that the only two things you can control are like your attitude and your effort. And part of your effort comes with being prepared. And so because I'm unable to be prepared for whatever the decision is going to be in the moment, that's what scares me the most. And then you asked, what is thrilling?
Yeah, what's the most thrilling thing?
I guess it's thrilling to know that I'm navigating new territory. And if this is the hardest point in my life that it's ever going to get, I know that whatever happens next, I'm going to be able to get through it, because I was able to navigate my senior year, writing my thesis, getting a job, not knowing if I'm going to play my last softball game ever. And I got through it through COVID. So if I can do that, then it makes everything else seem like a walk in the park.
You didn't script that, did you, Krista?
What's that?
You didn't script that, right?
No.
Yeah, that was awesome.
Oh, and Alex, I'm really interested in the character strength that you possess, that you've always possessed, but you're possibly employing more now during this time and all of your important work that you might not have focused on or utilized before we were thrown into this.
Yeah, that's a good question. I don't know if I'll have as good of an answer. I think for me, I notice a lot just in terms of like the people that I'm close with. With the guys on the team, I'm very like an observant person. So I think it's been interesting for me being away from a lot of my friends. Sometimes I get like blinders on. I just kind of focus on my work, and if I can't see people in person, it's hard for me to like notice when a person's feeling down or something like that. So I think for me, just learning kind of how to adapt to the environment and to like text guys and reach out to guys, get on FaceTime with people, and just still be the guy who can kind of connect people on the team. Because I think that's usually been my role, is like I'm a guy who wants everybody to be involved and wants like everybody to feel like they're valued and loved and cared about. That way we can all kind of push towards a goal. So like doing that remotely has been different for me. But I think I've still been able to kind of just reach out to guys individually. And just check in on people.
So before this summer, Alex, did you know like how good of a leader you are? Like you've really stepped up into, we've asked you to do a lot of stuff, right? You're like, oh my God, don't take the call when Molly calls, because she keeps asking me to do all these things. But did you know that you had this leadership in you, or like was it bubbling up, or have you had to be brave to be this kind of a leader that you've been?
I think for me, just in the past, I usually like shy away from, I think I'm a bit like Max, like I usually shy away from things. I usually kind of keep my ideas to myself. I'm usually more quiet and kind of reserved. I usually only step up into the leadership role if something's happening that I just can't ignore, that I feel like needs to be changed or fixed, if it kind of brings that passion out of me. Or if I, feel that the people are behind me and kind of choose me. If I'm elected to lead, I'll do it because I feel like that people have invested in me and I need to kind of value that, cherish that, and put that investment back in them. But yeah, so I think, I didn't really expect how many things I get involved in, especially in a semester that's remote. But I think it's just been a combination of me seeing stuff that I want to get changed and people believing in me to kind of be the guy to do that. So. But I've worked with a lot of like great people that have just kind of pushed me to do more. So
cool. Good. All right, Kel, how are we doing on time? I mean, again, we could go on and on and on, but are there questions in the chat that people want to ask either Krista or our amazing student athletes?
Yeah, I think we're doing well on time. So kudos to you guys for keeping the clock moving. I don't have any questions yet, but certainly with the group, if somebody does have a question and they'd like to unmute now and throw it out to one of the student athletes or to Krista or Molly, we want to make sure we give the opportunity for the participants to engage as well.
All right, well, I'll ask one while we're waiting. I'll ask, I'll go to Mackenzie, I guess. Talk a little bit about our Be a Tiger values. You guys know you couldn't get away with this webinar without bringing up the Be a Tiger values. So which one do you sort of resonate with the most, or what do you, as a leader, what do you think? I mean, they're all really important and one can't go without the other, but what do you think about as a leader in the Be a Tiger model?
So I think the one word that I resonate most with is probably integrity, especially now during COVID when we're all online. putting in the work academically and athletically is all based on your integrity, and it's, you know, doing the little things and the big things when nobody is watching, and that kind of defines who you are, I think. And I think that plays into a lot of other qualities as well, like respect and the ability to trust. And so I think that's kind of just like the foundation of all those other great attributes that come along with integrity.
Yeah, it's easy to have integrity when there's no downside to it, right? It's a lot harder when it's hard. So appreciate that. I love that. Okay, so there was a question, Kel, in the chat for Krista, right? You want to read that?
Yeah, so question from Kim Retrieve, who's on our Princeton Varsity Club Board of Directors, awesome volunteer, university citizen. She's asking if you can talk a little bit about the difference between girls and boys in the ages before 13 or so, and then after, from your research.
Krista, you're muted.
Rookie move. Our work, we concentrated our work first with teenage girls. That was the field that I was in beforehand. So we had a lot of relationships with girls who played sports and girls in general. And then we started to grow as people really started becoming interested in this impact programming, especially because in 100% of the sessions we were running, these 90-minute sessions with kids, with adults, 100% of them, we were significantly increasing feelings of bravery and confidence during those sessions. Now, what we know is that this stuff is really gendered, and it's hard to have that conversation because we take and ask people all different gender questions. So female, male, non-binary, prefer not to say, and prefer not to classify. And so we're learning a lot about non-male and non-female, but I can say, and it's a sensitive subject because it's a really vulnerable population. And I would say that girls are vulnerable in terms of these numbers, boys, and non-binary students, their gender, prefer not to classify, are even more vulnerable. But I'll break it down like this. Girls have lower bravery and confidence scores than boys across the board. The drop from 9 to 14 is dramatic for girls, and girls drop far lower than boys do, even though boys also drop. Boys tend to drop as they're growing into young men, and they sort of like drop a little bit more in between the ages of 20 and 22 before everybody's sort of taking off from about the same point at the age of 22. In terms of us dealing with boys and girls groups, we started doing boys and girls together, and then we separated because the way and the pathway to activating bravery in girls is different than a boys. Girls, we use their willingness to be emotional or their first move to be inside themselves, and we use that to get them into action. Boys, we use the physical nature of everything, working out things, in order to get them to invest in themselves emotionally. And which I think hearing Alex and Max about the reaching out to the men feels like it's in line with what we've experienced in working with college age young men. We worked with a group of 100 sophomore kids from Bishop McNamara High School in Maryland. Girls for 24 hours, boys for 24 hours. And we had to invert the way that we approached the programming. Girls, we started them in small groups so that they would be able to ultimately perform in front of the big group of 100. Boys, we started with a big group and used the inertia of that to get them to be vulnerable in smaller and smaller groups, which is really fascinating. We also, if you really like statistics, of course, I was looking for the Moneyball statistic to figure out like what is the major indicator of whatever. So we asked people, how do you feel compared to your peers? Do you feel more confident, as confident, or less confident? And for those people who say they feel less confident than their peers, their bravery and confidence scores, and this is boys or men and boys, girls and women, and non-binary individuals, we see that their bravery and confidence scores are significantly lower, in some cases up to 70%, which is insane. Now, we also know if they've classified themselves and their bravery and confidence scores are lower, that in our 90-minute session, we could isolate that population and their bravery and confidence scores would catch up to their peers who, and they might even change from less confident to as confident by the time they leave the session. These are the things that we're looking at. This is how we slice and dice our data. But I would say that across the board, girls and boys, their fears are the same. Their fears are the same across gender and across race, from everything that we can see. And we have thousands and thousands of Post-its of biggest fear, and we warm this up pretty hardcore. We do see in particular communities, if there's been a tragedy, if there's been something from the front pages of the paper, something really really traumatic, then that will show up in that session alone, but it's isolated. It has to be within 3 days of that thing happening in the community from what we've seen. Outside of that, we tend to see a slight differentiation between the number of emotional fears in men, but only by small percentage points. It's not statistically significant.
And I bet, and we don't have to go into great detail, but I'm imagining that playing sports for girls at that age, has there been any study that shows that their confidence level is higher than girls who don't play sports at that age? Have you done that research?
Oh yeah, but it's a really hard thing to say because, we have identified a really weird statistic that rowing teams seem to have lower confidence. Individual sport teams seem to have lower confidence and bravery, but what we see anecdotally in the session is that there's far more activation. So that there might be better management systems, if so the feelings are lower. We see that kids who are at high level institutions, and particularly if their teams or their universities compete at high levels and their academics are high, that there's a tendency to have far more lower bravery and confidence scores actually. And that's not necessarily affected positively if those kids are athletes. We do see that if we looked at the fear, what the fear profile was for kids at a school like Princeton, as competitive the teams are at Princeton, we would likely see that failure is over 80% of their emotional fears. And so we try to build programming that practices failure.
Oh, sorry, because we do, with our sports psychologists, I sit down with them all the time, and Jason Galucci's on the call. We say, what's the main thing you're hearing? They don't give us any details of the kids. What's the number one thing? And you're not surprised. It's the fear of failure, right? The fear of failure.
It's really
so
gripping.
hard. It's paralyzing.
Yeah, it is really gripping. And I would say that we can't transfer the skills when we were managing our fears of bugs. You can't turn the lights on when we're scared of our fear is rejection. We cannot kill the bug or run away from it when our fear is actually failure. We have to help athletes develop. We have to help all kids. We have to help people. But we're talking about Princeton athletes here. We need to help people. And this is why I think this is an opportune year to build what we call fear management system, a strong bravery practice that influences not just your psychological state, but what we know from this work with boys and girls is we need those in tandem to affect the physical state. And as somebody who struggled with depression since I was 8 years old, this is this is what I practice every day in order to stay alive. And it's certainly been one of the most effective features of my successful career. You can pull out a lot of things and I would still have been successful at lacrosse, but if you put out bravery, which I think far, far and beyond, I just innately had a large part of me, that is probably what made me really, really good.
Really killer.
Hey, Molly,
Read Kristen's questions, or if Kristen can do it, if she wants to ask the question alone.
I actually just want to ask a follow-up question to Krista. Is that okay? On the failure thing? Is that okay? Yeah. What do you think the role is in coaches, especially in youth sports, on the issue of failure? I feel like I have 3 kids who play a myriad of sports, and one of the things you notice is that oftentimes coaches pull them when they make a mistake, right? So they learn, don't try, be afraid of trying something novel, with your basketball, your left hand or whatever. So I'm just sort of curious, when you talk to kids, are you also training coaches, specifically of kids at younger ages where this sort of being punished for making a mistake or being punished for trying something seems to have a negative impact?
Yeah. And that's really hard because that's outside of my locus of control when I'm doing a brave session. And it was, outside of my control when I was a club team lacrosse coach and kids were going back to their high schools and to whatever environments they were in. But I would say I'd reframe that and create a culture of curiosity. Curiosity is about what do I want to know more than I am worried about the results of finding out. Right. So you can spin this on how what your brain has this gap of knowledge, right? It doesn't understand what the experience could be. So if you're more curious than you are afraid, I would work on building the strength of curiosity, because curiosity, what we used to say was a hack to bravery, but we actually say it's a spark for bravery. And if you can sustain that curiosity, then you're talking about a really positive way to start to get into dealing with failure. That's number one. I think that, in just having been a coach forever, you have to start, one of the reasons I start with that exercise we started with tonight is to really quickly be able to see what the risk tolerance is of the group, who the leaders are in the group, who's willing to go out on a limb, who actually doesn't have their inhibitions up in terms of like judgment or worried about what people are going to think. We see that so quickly and immediately. And so it's sort of the way that I would diagnose any group at the very beginning. And we can very quickly see if there's a culture of, like sort of punitive culture for risk taking. And I would say that means it's a punitive culture for curiosity.
Cool. All right, Kel, one more question, because I want to bring Max in here and just, Max, how's your team doing? How are you guys handling some of these challenges? How overall do you think you and your teammates are doing through these challenges?
I think it's difficult sort of to gauge like collectively where we are, because we're probably in different places. But when we're on the Zoom calls, it seems like, I don't know, some people sort of just there. Some people are, it's just a screen. Like you look at a screen all the time. But it's really important to just like check in on each other, like at a personal level. Like I'm going to talk to you one-on-one and see how you're doing. But I think like it is different. Like, there's really no answer for it. Like it's a hard time.
Yeah.
And you sort of do whatever you can to maintain those connections sort of before you may see each other in 3 months or maybe not. Like, we don't really know.
And is this conversation about being brave helpful, just to think like, hey, okay, it's all right. Like I can be curious about how I'm feeling. I can be brave. I can self-reflect. Is that something you'll take back to your guys?
Yeah, definitely. It's like, you just have to address the elephant in the room. Like, it's okay not to feel okay. Like, you don't have to, like, you can wake up and be like, okay, today sucks. And like, you can just work your way through it from there. Like, and that's something that you kind of have to acknowledge.
Awesome. Well, that's a good way to end, right, Kel? Let's thank you guys. Thank you, students. You guys are always amazing. Krista, you're amazing. This was so fun. I could go on for the whole night, but I'm sure people have things they have to do. But again, thank you guys. Really appreciate it.